Lesson number 3, we studied about why do we need small groups. Remember that we have two important roles why we need small group: to minister and to multiply. To minister is to edify, meaning to encourage members to grow on their faith, and to multiply is to evangelize. Small group members should apply what we learn from the scripture or the Bible. Previously, we also studied about how our values affects our culture. We need values to create culture, not church programs. Here, lesson number 4, I will explain how do we lead a small group. First, we will going to define an English term, goal, the object of a person's ambition or effort, an aim or desired result. You are already familiar with this. Vision, the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. And we use Proverbs 29, verse 18, where when there is no vision, people will perish. Next is the ministry pipeline. We use this to identify where people are and the necessary steps to help them move forward. And the last one, small group. It has a goal to minister and multiply. Consists of 4 to 10 people who meet on a once a week basis consistently to study the word. Lesson number 4, we will study and learn what are the 4 W's or the 4 W's format of leading a small group, and how are we going to identify who will lead small groups. So here we have a ministry pipeline, but specifically it's for the small group, also known as C group or community groups. So this leadership pipeline is a custom built pipeline that allows community group or small group to see where their members are when they need to grow in their faith. It allows the developing leader also to see a clear path to further his leadership development within small group. It also allows the existing leadership to identify where people are in their system of effectively developing leaders. This also gives us a greater structure to develop culture among volunteers and paid team members. So this pipeline helps us to identify the strengths of the individual and move them to more fulfilling ministry desired in the future. It also relieves ambiguity or unnecessary steps, unnecessary idea or unnecessary role of what level or kind of leader they are. It also helps us to identify if a great leader exists but doesn't have the time to lead in the ministry in that season of their life. So the first part is how do we lead a small group or C group? We have to analyze the steps. There are three things that we want to consider: identifying who should lead the group, training small group leaders, and really knowledgeable how to lead a small group. So step number one, we identify who should lead a small group. So we're going to take the ICNU leadership principle here. I'm going to list down the characteristic of a small group leader, but it doesn't mean that you should look for a perfect person that fits all the characteristics here. So at least 2 to 3, that's okay, and then the rest will follow. I mean, you have to develop leaders anyway. Number 1, very important, that a small group leader, should have a Christian lifestyle. In 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12, Paul talks about having a life following what Christ and the way how a Christian should talk, walk, and live. As a small group leader, we should walk the talk and live out the faith that lives in us. In order to be effective, we also must live our lives in private, online, social media, and publicly in such a way that honors our Christian faith in Jesus Christ. Number two, willingness to learn and be coached. Second Timothy chapter 2, verses 14 to 26. Now leaders, even in any age, if this leader is a young leader or a more mature in age leader, leaders in general have a learning lifestyle and are consistently finding ways to continue to learn both in biblical and leadership principles. Number three, a small group leader should have a servant attitude. Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. And it talks about having an attitude of a servant will give a small group leader a lot of leverage and leadership credit in order to serve his or her group or community and ultimately serving in our church. Number four, a small group leader at least have the ability to gather a group together. So this is something that we like when we're looking for a volunteer leader who will lead small groups. Acts chapter 6 verse 3. It is important that the leader has a strong ability to call, communicate, and gather people together so that they come together in a small group manner. Having the ability to gather others doesn't mean that you have a personality that is going to draw people to yourself. It ultimately means that you are intentionally reaching out to the members of your groups along with the people who aren't part of the group, which is the unbelievers, who might be interested in being part of the group. This includes the critical part of following up with members after a small group meeting, whether or not they were present last week. And it is really important for us to know that this builds a foundation of relationship towards unbelievers. Number five, qualities of a small group leader is having availability. Mark chapter 1, verses 17 to 18. Of course, it is hard to have a group if you're not available, if you're not committed for the group. Being available doesn't mean that this is a full time job. Being available means that you are willing to find time to review the previous notes and content of your small group topic. This gives you enough preparation to be ready to answer, discuss, and facilitate questions for the group. And you only have a once a week, almost 1 to 2 hours commitment per week. Number six, a small group leader should have a vision for the future. As I mentioned it again and again, Proverbs 29 verse 18, people with vision create vision. So this leader doesn't necessarily need to have a vision for the whole church, but has a vision and purpose for his small group on how they reach, serve the community, and the church. Number two step, intentionally developing the next leader in training. An effective small group leader will also have the time to intentionally build up, develop, and train the next leader. This leader in is called the leader in training. I call it the LIT. Every small group leader should have one leader in training. So if we look at the leadership pipeline that you saw earlier in the previous slides, if you will see the leadership pipeline, that every person in the leadership and ministry went through a series of development steps. This leader in training, led by the small group leader, is a step in the leadership development and further spiritual leadership and numerical growth of this particular small group. With the purpose of every small group, remember two things: to minister and to multiply. It only makes sense that in order to multiply, the new leader of the multiplied group must be effectively equipped, empowered, and trained. This is done intentionally by the small group leader, and he or she can accomplish this in many ways. Again, an effective small group leader will also make time to intentionally build up, develop, and train the next leader in training, also known as the LIT, leader in training. So every small group leader should have LIT. Now, it will take time for a small group to develop this, but intentionally, you will see the progress of your small group. Engage the leader in training in the formal small group leader training. So we actually have modules for that you can download online when you want to just see and look what's inside the training. With that, by entrusting the new leader in training into the leadership training, this gives the developing leader additional tools or equipping them that they may not have gained directly from their small group leader. It's also important that a small group leader intentionally gives leadership roles to the leader in training all throughout the time that they are in the training. Number two, engage the leader in training in live training. We call it on the job training. For example, allowing the leader in training to take care of one of the four W's, which we will discuss later on, in order to give them experience as they began to lead the group. Effectively, this group should multiply with the leader in training taking the leadership of the newly multiplied group. Number three, we set the goals and benchmarks for the leader in training to accomplish and strive forwards. It is important that the leader in training has a goal, has a target, and a level of service to pursue. This allowed the leader in training to not only stay focused on reaching the goals laid out for him, but also helps the existing small group leader to think forward as to how to fully equip and prepare his leader in training to effectively lead his own small group. Last one. The small group leader should allow the leader in training to lead his own group. Once the group is multiplied, the leader in training then takes the new leadership role, which is a small group leader, and begins to lead his or own group. Soon after, the new leader, formerly the leader in training, must now identify who has the next potential to become a leader in training that they can pour out into, invest in, and ultimately train into becoming a leader of a group themselves. So, for this part, you don't actually need to answer this. This is not part of your grading system, but if you really want to answer, then go. You are not to send any video because your quiz is only from lesson 1 up to lesson 3. So for lesson 4 and lesson 5, you don't need to submit a video, but you can answer the question. Why is it important to have a Christ like lifestyle if you're about to lead a small group? What do you think? Do you think there's a connection between willingness to learn and a servant attitude? You will answer it by yes or no. But if your answer is yes, what are the similarities? Now, number three is really controversial. Have you experienced a leader who is unwilling to learn and is trying to lead without a lifestyle of following Christ? Example, how did that impact you when you tried to follow that leader? And that's it. Lesson number 4 is done.